Waiting for Seconds is a podcast that talks about subjects of self-harm, suicide, eating disorders, and other personal subjects. If you don't feel comfortable listening to this podcast alone, listen to it with someone important to you. May that be a teacher, a parent figure, or someone you feel comfortable being with. Please enjoy the rest of the episode. Hello, this is Waiting for Seconds, the interview podcast where we meet people and ask them who they are and why they are. I'm your host, Shannon Miller, and I'm here with my co host, Malcolm Elcott. And this episode's guest, we have our friend, Aaron Waskow.
Today will be the first episode of many with a lovely guest. This time we'll be talking with Aaron. If you would, Aaron, love you to introduce yourself just real quick.
Hi, I'm Aaron. I am 20 years old. I was born in Colorado and I've lived here all my life with my parents and younger sister Emily, who's now living in Boston. I recently adopted a kitten who's joined our family, and we've had pets around for as long as I can remember. And I met Malcolm in high school about 6 years ago.
Yeah. Freshman year of high school, if I remember correctly. We, never super good friends, but we worked together on a few things. You were one of the smart kids in class, so, it's nice to be around you. And then more recently, we reconnected over online over D&D, I think.
Mhm.
Some video games and then
Yeah.
some D&D, and
I think we finally started getting closer in our sophomore year when we were both in computer science with Mr. LaFortune.
yeah, that was a fun class.
Wait, you had a teacher named Mrs. LaFortune?
Mr.
Mr.
His last name is LaFortune.
Although I believe now he goes by, or they go by less binary pronouns. I don't know, though. They moved out of state.
Uh,
Okay, well, Shannon, how'd you...
I met Aaron through Malcolm. Originally, it was just playing some Minecraft and bullshitting, and hopped on Discord and just kind of chatted a little bit. But then we got to know each other when the lovely game Among Us came out, and we just kind of been friends ever since.
Yeah. Well, we have a couple questions here for you, Aaron, that we plan to ask. Some we discussed in the first episode, some new ones, some that we might drop on you out of nowhere.
all right. I guess I will do my best to improvise.
I hope you do. Well, I think I'm just going to start with this one here. You mentioned your sister, and of course your beautiful little kitten.
Yes.
But I want to know about your family just a little bit more. I want to know about, often for many people, especially in films and TV and stuff like that, family can be more than blood. Uh, have you ever found friends or mentors that you'd be willing to consider family in that same way?
Yeah. Probably my best friend and one I've stayed in touch with for a very long time, Aton. We met in Sunday school when I was probably in third grade. And we've always been super close. And I love being over with him and his parents, and I mean, they just treat me like part of their family, and I consider them part of mine. But yeah,
That is a very beautiful relationship right there.
yeah, I'm so blessed. I feel happy.
Yeah. Good to have
No-
friends and family like that who are just so
Mhm.
open to that kind of thing. Now you said you met Aton in Sunday school. That's what, like 5?
Hmm?
That was
Uh,
what, like 5 years old?
no, for us that was it was at a synagogue,
Okay.
and that was in third grade when we met.
Okay.
Um, just kind of like some Torah study, some other things just about Judaism in general.
Okay.
Uh, yeah.
Well
So,
then, go ahead.
so speaking of Judaism, do you find it to be more a you thing, more personal to you? Because I know with my Christianity, it's more personal to me than like rather my family. Would you say the same? Is it more about you and your connection with God, or is it you're just doing it because of your family? Or
Um,
maybe you can elaborate more on that.
so for me, I've never really considered myself spiritual or religious. I participate in Judaism, and the thing that I get the most out of it is the community. I love being around it, especially since so many of my experiences are tied to outdoors. When I was in elementary and middle school, I would go to summer camp up in the mountains. That was it was a Jewish summer camp, and we would go on hikes and but also do prayer services out in the middle of the woods and all of these other
Mm,
things that just have very nice memories for me. Um,
Gotcha.
I suppose I don't feel especially spiritual or religious because I've always been told and taught that I need to do whatever it is myself, and take responsibility for whatever happens, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, so it's hard to give that up, as well as it's sometimes hard for me to consider the existence of a higher being that still allows certain things to happen. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I mean, I just kind of don't think about it, I guess, is the way I approach it. I don't say
It's
that there
almost
is or isn't a higher being. I say that there might be, and the presence of one doesn't impact my life right now. So,
yeah.
that's very very well put. Now, so you were saying you still celebrate it. Is it more natural just because since your family has done it for quite a long time? Is it just more natural to join them in those celebrations, or
yeah. I mean it's also times to get together and to
mm,
frequently celebrate. Tomorrow is actually the biggest holiday in Judaism, Yom Kippur, which is a day of forgiveness and atonement even.
mm,
Um
Okay.
and so I'll be fasting tomorrow, as well as going to services in the morning, and then many people go to services again at night, after which you break the fast. But I'm not sure if that's in the cards for me tomorrow.
right?
Right now I'm just excited and happy because I feel like I am going to be able to fast tomorrow because with my medications I frequently can't because I need to eat in order for me to not throw them back up.
Mm-hmm.
But with my current condition, I'm doing well enough that I think I will be able to. But another interesting thing that I find about Judaism is that it is, while it's a mitzvah to fast, it is a sin to do so if that would put yourself in danger.
Hmm.
Or, for instance, if you are pregnant and doing so might harm the well being of the baby, you are expected not to fast.
That is interesting.
Hmm.
I've never heard of that, huh?
Yeah, it's a very, I mean, that part of that's because of the, I'm not as, I've never practiced as orthodox as some, but that's a pretty common interpretation of it. And I think that that's just super interesting.
that seems to exemplify, to me at least, that community aspect of it. That the ritual is great, but only if it is good for you. Only if you can do it safely and healthily, and not deprive the community of your, perhaps your child's spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Oh.
Now,
That's a very valuable tradition.
now you mentioned medication. Is there? I know very little about it, but do you have an illness, or is it just like?
Yeah. So my medical issues are pretty widespread and far stretched. I've got my own share of psychological things. When I was little, I was diagnosed with ADHD, Asperger's syndrome, and dysgraphia.
Hmm.
And around the age of 11 or maybe 12, I started having chronic pain,
Hmm.
um, which we didn't figure out the cause of until I was probably 16 or so, when we found out that I have chronic Lyme disease, as well as several other co-infections that come along with it. For me, those are Babesia, Bartonellosis, and Mycoplasma. So some of those are viral. I think there's one virus, two bacteria, and one of them is a parasite. Um, but the issue with these conditions is that they hide very deep into tissues, and if you try to kill them off too quickly, it produces what's called a Herxheimer reaction, where the symptoms worsen drastically.
Mm.
Uh, so treating this kind of illness is very difficult and it's a long process. I've been being treated for these for the past 4 or 5 years. My mom has the same kind of set of issues, and
Yeah.
she's in a similar boat. But yeah, it causes migrating joint pain from the Bartonella, muscle spasms and back pain from the Lyme. But the other thing is a number of these conditions cause depression and anxiety. So, in addition to stressful circumstances in my life, I'm also dealing with the physiological addition of uh, depression. So, as such, I'm on, I don't know, probably 10 prescriptions. I'm taking 4 antibiotics right now and have been for the past several years and will continue to do so for a while. Um, and
Would you be willing to describe how these conditions and your chronic pain has affected your life?
yeah, so one of the biggest things is that, um, for a while, there have been periods of time when my symptoms have gone up and down. In this kind of process, growth isn't linear, it's a wave.
Mhm.
But there have been periods of time where I'm not able to do anything that day because I'm in too much pain. Where um I contemplated suicide. I used to self-harm as a way to focus and be able to drown out the rest of the pain that was just overwhelming my entire body. And to deal with it, I also tried using a TENS unit, constantly lidocaine patches, menthol, ibuprofen, whatever I could to reduce or lessen the pain. Now it's I've grown much better at managing pain. I have a high pain tolerance now because I've been dealing with this for such a long time. But
Yeah.
now the biggest issue is the fatigue that comes on with a flare-up of the Lyme, where I just don't have the energy to do things, which can be very difficult. And unfortunately, if things line up poorly, for instance, if I'm having a flare up on the same day that I needed to refill my pill sorter, I might leave myself high and dry, in which case it's going to self perpetuate for a little while until I get lucky enough to fix it. But because of that, I had to take a break from college, and I'm still taking a break until I can get this a little bit more under control again.
Mm.
Because there were enough times where I just couldn't show up to class. So I'm taking a break from that for right now, but I'm it's just a process on how to live with this. I suppose part of the issue is that it's sometimes hard for me to remember and think of myself as someone with a chronic illness because due to the treatment, sometimes I feel relatively healthy and I don't feel ill. And so I have expectations of myself that I won't be able to meet because there are extra hurdles.
Yeah.
And so trying to navigate through that is one of the big difficulties and hurdles I'm working on right now.
Wow. I really appreciate you being able to share that with us, because it takes a lot of like bravery to really just push through it and push past the pain. Now, has this affected you in other ways besides schooling, and has it affected your relationships in any way?
Definitely. Yeah. I've got a number of friends who I've ghosted because I can't match their energy. Um,
Yeah.
and I see it especially with my dad right now where he wants to be he needs to be doing things at all times because for him if he's at home, he's gonna sit down on the couch, watch TV, and eat the whole time. And so to keep his weight in check and to keep himself healthy, he needs to be doing something at all times of the day.
Yeah.
And if he wants to do things with me, he wants to do a number of things with me. And I can't do more than one or two of those in a day.
Right.
After that I just tap out. Um but so it's a balance. Because thankfully my ADHD medication does help with the energy issues, although I need to be very careful with it because I, on top of the other things, I've got an issue we're trying to figure out right now where I've got chronic sinus tachycardia. So my resting heart rate is generally speaking between 100 and 120 beats per minute.
Oh my gosh.
So it's just juggling medications and figuring out how we can make sure my quality of life is as best as it can be.
So is this something that the doctors can potentially cure, or is this just going to be with you for the rest of your life, as far as you know?
So there is no known cure for Lyme disease or those other co-infections that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But there are people who are able to go into remission. Unfortunately, I'm not at that point yet, and frankly, it's hard to hold out hope for it, given how long I've been on antibiotics,
Yeah.
especially with the added risks of being on antibiotics for extended periods of time. I try to keep a positive outlook, but I do know that I'm putting more wear on my liver, kidneys, heart, and intestinal tract than other people. Just by the nature of there are good things in your body that you need to have, and the antibiotics can't specifically target the bad things. So I take probiotics every day to help maintain my gut environment, but that's another thing is that if I mess up and we do these medications incorrectly, I could kill my gut environment and need to be fed through a tube for the rest of my life. So
Well, I hope you don't mind me saying so, but that sounds stressful at the very least. Sounds like a lot to deal with, and I mean, you mentioned that you dealt with some depression and earlier, and so I mean, clearly you have found ways to deal with it. Would you be willing to share those with us and tell us about your experience in managing stress and stress factors?
yeah. So one of the biggest things is I've conditioned myself to, for the most part, not get stressed by most things. I've given myself a kind of hands-off approach where it's okay, this happened. All right, it happened. What are we going to do about it now? But not needing to worry about the fact that something is or isn't happening is convenient. It's definitely affected me negatively in the past where, like, okay, yeah, it's coming up, or, oh, I didn't do this, oh, well, kind of thing, where the stress that, like, our bodies get stressed naturally for a reason, and if I'm suppressing that, then I'm not getting the natural response to something that should be causing me stress. But I I guess the biggest reason why I avoid it entirely so heavily is because when I get stressed, my back spasms, and um it starts slowly, but it pulls my spine and ribs out of place. Um for a period of time I was going to the chiropractor multiple times every week. Um I've gotten pretty skilled at doing chiropractic adjustments on myself at this point, but I still go relatively regularly. Right now, the lady I'm seeing I go to once a month. But she does a much more in-depth type of chiropractic adjustment than many do.
Yeah.
But for stress, I mean when it happens and I do experience stress that I couldn't just avoid, um I mean, I've gone through enough therapy programs as well as for a period in high school I went my depression was bad enough that I went and stayed at an inpatient uh facility for the hospitalization kind for a bit, and then after that I went to a residential treatment facility and I spent about 7 months there. But I learned a great deal there. Between breathing techniques and, I mean, I can always distract myself from something easily
Mhm.
enough. I prefer to avoid doing it in that way because in order to successfully manage and move on from something, it's best to actually resolve it instead of just ignore it until it goes away. But that is something that, I mean, it's a fallback. It's something that I know that I can do whenever necessary. Uh, but breathing, there's types of exercises you can do with relaxing one part of your body and then another part and then another part, so on and so forth. Um, I've never found that stress balls or anything of that like are particularly helpful.
Yeah.
But um there's always things that you can do to help your body if you're able and willing to listen to your body enough.
Mhm.
Interestingly, that's how I learned how to do most of the chiropractic adjustments on myself, is I listened to my body, like, okay, it will feel good if I do this. And it did. And
Gotten
so,
very used to listening to
mhm,
your body and knowing how it works.
mhm. Yeah, and especially with the correlation between depression and Lyme disease flare-ups, it means that if I'm able to notice that slight increase or change in pain or what have you, I'll be able to notice a beginning of a change in depression or psyche. And being able to, because otherwise it can be hard to notice when that's happening. So, learning to listen to that has been definitely one of my biggest strengths. Although it means that if I can't figure it out, it's confusing and scary because I'm so used to being able to know that.
Mm. Yeah, that seems like it would be a deeply valuable asset that without it is terrifying. Well, I would wonder, you have expressed some uh, worries about the future. Hard to see yourself uh, without Lyme disease or without your coexisting illnesses. Um, do you think you would call yourself an optimist or a pessimist? Do you believe that the world has innate good in it and things will end out well? Do you believe people are innately good, or the other way around? World is bad, people might be bad.
Hmm. That's interesting. I would think of those as two different things.
Okay.
Where in regards to the way I view people, um, I find that goodness is it's a lot easier to see the world if you look at goodness as something unexpected and pleasant because it's less disappointing that way.
Hmm.
If you aren't expecting it, then it's pleasant. And if you and the people who aren't as good aren't going to make you feel let down. Generally speaking, I would say I tend towards pessimism. Um,
Okay.
but I mean, I've been working on that, and so I my natural is definitely cynical and pessimist. But I try to hope is the way I would put it.
Expect the worst and hope for the best.
Hmm.
It's a good
Yeah.
way to look at things.
Yeah. Seems a very healthy way to look at things.
Now, is this part of your worldview? Is it um, would you say that like pessimism kind of takes from your worldview about how you look at it, or is it has it been affected by your religion, or I
So,
guess
what do you exactly mean by worldview in this regard?
well, I try to take my my worldview. It's how I've been influenced. It's how I look with the influences around me, religion, um, my friends, my family, and or even politics, for that matter. And it's how I look at the world, just as a whole. And I guess what I'm trying to ask is like, what is like the basic way that you would call your worldview, and kind of expand upon that.
Um, so I suppose I have two different ways I view. Overall, I would consider myself an idealist. I have lots of ideas for how the world should be, how I wish it would be. Um,
Hmm.
and in that manner, I think I share a great deal with Malcolm, where I think that the world should have no hungry people. I think that everyone should have enough to live life happily.
Mm.
But in regards to any type of political beliefs, I usually steer more clear of those, given that it's always such an argument and to try and figure out the process. The process is something that is the thing that everyone gets caught up on, I feel. In addition
Mhm.
to what everyone considers their ideal,
Hmm.
whether it be like even the abortion debate on whether when something becomes human. It's everyone wants the best for humans, but in that instance, it's a discussion of whether X week old fetus is or isn't human, kind of thing. Um, so I think that we innately all want the same thing, or at least I hope that. Um,
We all
and
want good, but exactly what we see as good and how we get there
mhm.
is always different.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
worldview, I would say, is very idealistic and positive. I don't know that I act on that,
Hmm.
given
It's
that
like
it's a lot more difficult. It's easy to hope and imagine for something, but hard
To
to
work
bring
harder.
that
right.
into reality.
Yeah.
It's like you want what's best for the world, even though at maybe at this moment or maybe at all, you can't really help that.
Mm.
You say you generally stay out of politics. Is that reasonable to say?
Yeah, I'd say
That
so.
you how does that how did that originate and how does that currently happen? Do you just try to avoid it as best you can? Do you avoid arguments as best you can?
Generally speaking, yeah, one of my, I guess that's partially a worldview as well, is I I try not to argue. I
Hmm.
try and I try not to point blame at people as
Mm.
best I can. Um, because I mean, everyone has their own thing they're going through, and even if they don't, what does it matter to me if they don't? That unless I actively think that they're being malicious, which I there's little to no reason for almost anyone to do so, or at the very least, that's what I choose to believe. And so yeah, I try and avoid arguments. Part of that's from stress, and part of it's just because I don't like fighting with people.
Yeah.
Uh, and in that way, that's that's definitely why I avoid politics because it is so frequently some when people are concerned about something they care about, then they act more drastically and dramatically.
Hmm.
Mm.
So it gets more heated.
I'm I appreciate that worldview of avoiding fights when possible because the fight doesn't help anybody. Everybody's got their own problems, and having a fight about it just isn't going to make it better.
Yeah, that's for sure. Now, with all of that in mind, with your health issues, and trying to steer kind of away from politics, would where would you like to be in 5 years, just from now? Is it married? Is it like cured of your illnesses, or where would you like to be?
Um, so I've always had a lot of issues with this type of question because I, by habit, like to go through and then, like, I like to find the path that will take me there. And
Hmm.
right now, I don't have a path. I would love it if I were no longer suffering from these illnesses. That would be fantastic. But I don't expect it, and so in 5 years, I would like to be at a place where I have it enough under control that the fluctuations are manageable and I have systems in place to deal with that, whether that ends up being that the fluctuations are still happening and they're happening badly, but I'm working at a job where I can get time off for those, or they aren't happening, or what have you. I suppose my biggest thing is that in 5 years, I would like to be more independent,
Hmm.
um, working, uh, living at my own place, whether that's with roommates or otherwise, and happy. That's really the biggest thing. In regards to like material needs or anything, I whatever. Um, that that is what it is. Um, wherever that lines up. It's hard for me to look at it sometimes because I don't know how the path will look, especially given, for instance, after I leave my parents, I'm gonna need to be paying for all of these prescriptions, as well as I'm on a low inflammation diet, so I avoid sugars, gluten. I'm supposed to avoid dairy. I haven't been doing that, but I'm probably going to move back towards that relatively soon. And then if I were to go a couple steps further, it would be nightshades, grains, but all of these end up adding up to a higher cost of living, which can be concerning when I try and think about how I'm going to make it all work. So right now, I avoid thinking about how I'll make it all work and instead say I want to aim to be feeling happy and healthy enough in 5 years.
I really respect that. I always look at it, almost always look at it with a material thing, a wife, a family, a better job, who knows what, but it's it was very well put, that just as simple as it can be, healthy and happy in the next 5 years. Now, you were also mentioning like a stable job. Now, have you had any other jobs? Have you like that you've tried to really work at, or just because of
Um,
your health it just affected you and you couldn't do it?
so I worked at King Supers for a while, and I stopped for I don't remember why. Oh, they were treating me poorly, and I talked to them about at that point in time I needed to have one Monday off every month to go and see my uh Lyme doctor,
Hmm.
who I'm lucky to have a one of the best specialists in the world for Lyme disease in Colorado. But it's a bit of a drive, and they, even though we talked about this when they hired me, they continually failed to provide me with that day off and said, "Oh, well, if you can find someone to cover your shift." And eventually I said, "No, my health is a priority over
Yeah.
the way you treat me." And so I left. Um, I've one thing I've considered is I could be doing work on Fiverr or something else. I've got lots of skills in computer science as well as computer-aided design is one of my biggest passions. I did it all throughout high school, and it's ultimately what made me decide that I wanted to go towards mechanical engineering. Um, Although ever since I was little, I'd said I wanted to be an inventor. And the title has just changed over time as I figured
Uh-huh.
out what fits that description more.
Right.
Um, but in high school, I got my associates, and then immediately after my professional level certifications with the most widely used software in the industry's SolidWorks. And I was working towards getting my expert. I took a bit of a break because the licensing is incredibly expensive.
Mm.
And while I was in college, I didn't need to do that or have the time to be working on that in addition to my other classes. Uh, but because I learned so quickly, I feel confident that I could do a number of other IT or computer related jobs. Because that's been another one of my passions. It's just a process of finding a place and then actually making that first step that I've been putting off for so long. Um, but so I don't know exactly what the stable job that I'm looking to have in 5 years is. It
Mm.
could be I'm working somewhere temporarily while I'm still in college because I've gone back, or I've gone back and completed college already and I'm working as a mechanical engineer or biomedical engineer, or I decided I wanted to keep going and I'm going for my master's degree, or any number of things. So I know
Hmm.
that I've got a lot of paths that I can choose to take, and I also know that right now the important thing isn't deciding on what path I'm going to be on in 5 years. It's taking steps that will allow me to go down those paths.
Hmm.
Because
Wow.
if I try and force myself to decide, I'll sit here worrying and debating between all of them, and I don't
Yeah.
have enough information to do that yet. So,
I want to ask you, we've talked quite a bit about your past few years with your Lyme disease and now the future, but I'd like to know a little bit more about the younger years. Your before you had Lyme disease, before your chronic pain started. Uh, how would you describe your childhood? Uh, with your sibling and your pets. As it like,
um,
was it a good childhood?
yeah, I would say so. I mean, we were catered to. My mom always drove us. Now I can't imagine why, but she would drive us 40 minutes to school, and my dad worked frequently 70 hours a week. Um, he's a veterinarian. He's retired now. He's actually exactly 33 years older than I am.
Heh.
Uh, we have the same birthday.
Hmm.
Um, but I mean, it was always fun. We never, for when I remember, we never had like missing wants or needs.
Mm.
And I suppose I had a number of difficulties with. I struggled to fit in and figure out how that was supposed to work at school. My sister and I went to Challenge School, which was a magnet school for gifted, in the Cherry Creek School District, and I thrived there. The biggest thing was that you could go at much more of your own pace, and so I was taking classes that I would then relearn in my senior year of high school, for instance, which I always laugh about. I'm like, really? This is what you're teaching me now, as if I didn't learn that then. And I mean, it was then that my sister and I started to kind of distinguish ourselves from each other a bit more. I am much more innately and naturally gifted than her. Um, my IQ is 147.
Damn.
And I learn very quickly. But she had always been, I had outshadowed her, but she always worked so much harder. And she has continued to do that with amounts of effort I've never been able to match. Not to say she was a not smart child, of course. She wouldn't have gotten into this school if she weren't. And she was always brighter than most of the people around her, and she also thrived there. And now, more recently, she's now 19 as of a couple weeks ago. And last year, while she was 18, she graduated with her bachelor's from
Wow.
Goucher University. Yeah, or Goucher College, I think, out in Baltimore. In neuropsychology.
Oh,
And she's still
wow.
in Baltimore, you said?
She came back and stayed with us for a couple months. And now she's moved out to Boston, working on a research team with the Veterans Association for Alzheimer's.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's very impressive.
Yeah, so while we were little, I definitely was the one outshining her, and now I can't even compare. And I'm just so proud of her.
I'll say I don't think there are many people who can compare. That is a extremely impressive thing to do.
I mean, getting your bachelor's at 18.
Yeah, it's nuts.
That's
With a 4.0,
insane.
mind you, she
Oh,
also was
right.
their valedictorian.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
it.
3 years
I'm like,
younger
all
than most
right,
of the other students.
3 years? No, she was probably 4 for at least for most of them.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because
Holy
there's a
crap.
number of high school seniors who are 18.
Yeah.
Right. Man.
Just nutty. I can't. I'm just so proud of her. And yeah, she's working multiple jobs now, just partially because living in Boston is in the city is expensive, even
Right.
with a roommate, and partially because, much like my dad, she needs to be staying busy.
Yeah.
Like she would study 9 hours a day, then work, and then go to classes, and then go hang out with friends and go drinking or something. And like, how do you manage to fit that much time in a day? It
Drink,
just baffles
drink,
me.
drinking
Yeah,
legally, right?
yeah, I wish.
Yeah.
She went to college, she got the college experience.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So, my sweet 22-year-old, not 19,
Yes, of course.
22-year-old
That's
sister.
right. Wink.
Uh-huh. Yep. I'm super pleased about that. We saw some pictures of her apartment, and she's got a poster, a mixing guide poster on one of her walls in the kitchen. I'm like, oh god. My sweet, sweet little sister.
Oh man.
Oh well. She manages herself responsibly enough that
hmm
not much need for worry there.
Um, I'd like to ask you, and it's come up a couple of times, your Lyme disease, your IQ, your uh, trouble with illnesses and mental illnesses, um, often debated, often talked about is the idea of nature versus nurture. whether the circumstances one is born with are more important or the circumstance one grows up in and exists in are more important.
Yeah. So for me, I think that the nature has a definitive impact. Just some people will grow up to be taller, better looking, what have you. And those things aren't going to be changed. And I think this is the most, like, just as I was talking about actually, where I was born in a number of ways much more gifted than my sister was. But her effort led her to beat me out of college by a long shot and to be so much more successful than I am. So in that regard, I think that nurture is such a more significant aspect in someone's life. Because what are we if not our collection of memories and experiences and thoughts? Additionally, while there's no good way to prove or disprove how much of you is determined from birth, I like to think of it as all the individual's own personal achievements. I don't like to leave that opportunity to discredit someone by saying, oh, well, they were just born with it better than me.
Yeah.
That has always seemed like an excuse to me. So while I know that nature has a significant impact, especially in a number of people's lives, nurture is more important in defining who you are as a human.
Wow.
Well,
Actions speak louder than words.
Yeah. Actions do speak louder than words.
Well, that was a great question to finish off of, and I want to just say thank you again for being able to open up to us, and so we could understand how your life works and who you are as a person. Final time, I just wanted to say thank you, and I imagine Malcolm feels the same way.
Yeah, we really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. I love the opportunity. And
So,
looking forward to future episodes.
Yeah.
all right. Thank you guys so much for listening to Waiting for Seconds. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.